flying saucers propel themselves. He wrote his name on the front of the thing with this white paper inside, and as soon as I pulled it out of the envelope and looked at the thing, I said, wait, and he's leaving. He's just hustling out of the restaurant without responding or giving us any follow-up information. And what I did do, at least, is I said, are you, and I said the name of the author that was on this white paper. All he said was yes, and left. So I do have his name, but I have blocked it out on the document for right now because I'm not sure exactly what he wants us to do with his thing and whether he wants to be accredited as the author, which indeed he is. He seems to be a physicist. And this white paper is probably, I would say, 40 pages long with diagrams, explanations, theories of how the vortex of potentially liquid that runs around inside of these, kind of like mechanisms that create or obfuscate gravity is what they do.
Oh, wow.
And what I'm doing is just kind of showing to the Facebook folks out there just a diagram of one of the things she's written about the idea that mercury, if you spin the mercury in a certain way, and you can create an anti-gravity effect by doing so, you can actually create that circle into kind of an oblong circle in a certain direction. And when you do that, you actually supposedly create motion by the...
Now,
yeah.
You mentioned mercury. Are we talking like the metal mercury, that mercury?
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
that's what I have heard. Yeah.
Now, that's funny you mentioned that because I had a guest on, and I think I was telling you about it, when he was a kid in their little town, that his father worked as a dispatcher for the police department. They got phone calls in from a bunch of people saying that a UFO landed and then took back off after a few minutes. And when the police got there and all these people gathered to see what it was, there was like a 30, 40-foot round circle burnt all the way through the asphalt. But what was unique about the next morning, well, not that morning, but right then and there, I guess, they were, looking at it and they found looked like little droplets of mercury. The metal, it kind of, if you drop it on, a pavement or on a table, it kind of formed like little balls.
Yes, right.
And it was a bunch of that. And, but the story of the thing is that in the middle of the night, somebody, and it wasn't the local police because, again, his father was a dispatcher. By morning, it was re-asphalted. And the police department, nobody in the town, knew anything about it being asphalted. All they knew is that supposedly something landed there. It burned into the asphalt. There was like these little mercury droplets around everywhere. Now, I have talked to a couple scientists about this, and they have a theory that, when a spaceship comes back into our atmosphere and stuff, that the way it propels itself, it could actually be overheating. And that's why they maybe go into the water to cool down, or they have to land for a short period of time to cool back down because of the heat generated.
Now, that's an interesting theory. You might be right. There are lots of accounts of that happening where these things are true. Well, let's just talk about this latest disclosure from the U.S. government when they showed us the gun camera footage of those two Navy pilots off of the Nimitz carrier.
Oh yeah.
They said, and this is kind of in the New York Times article that came out about this disclosure, December 16th of last year. They included this down at the bottom of the article. Most people don't understand or remember what this part was, is that not only were they seeing this thing that they nicknamed the Tic Tac UFO flying and moving from 80,000 feet down to the surface of the ocean in like 5 seconds. That's how fast this thing was moving. Not only that, they said that this Tic Tac UFO was hovering right over the water and underneath the water, a submerged object the size of maybe, they said it was about 100 feet in diameter. It was dark, and it was actually foaming. The water was foaming underneath this little UFO that was hovering above this one that was submerged. The theory was, they said, they believed that this little Tic Tac thing was going to dock with this large mothership underneath the ocean. So there you go. It's a very similar thing where these craft potentially could have bases under the water, and maybe that's what they use to cool them down too.
Well, also Mary runs a reporting center out of Cashiers, North Carolina. She said that there is some underground military bases that supposedly, the UFOs go in and out of, because they have a very, very high sightings of UFOs in that area. I mean, probably one of the highest in the country on a regular basis. So, it makes you think, that, they are coming on this planet. They are landing. But what really got me interested on that report you have, and I only saw a little bit about it, when you were talking about it the other night, is that the mercury, it kind of like, okay, mercury. And, then it stuck with me with what that one guest said. And I really checked out the guest, and his father did work for that police department for like 20-some years at that time frame. Very credible person until he had his heart attack, and that's when he retired. But, it seems like, and there was a little article about in their town paper about supposedly a craft landing in the hospital parking lot and then taken back off. So I'm just wondering, from the heat, or if, it developed some type of leak or something strange, because, the mercury in what your report, and then all of a sudden, the sightings of like where it landed left mercury droplets around the circle. And I'm going to do some more research and find out if any other, reports of UFO landings, if there was any of that mercury, droplets left, also.
Well, there are. Matter of fact, Gary, the very first modern-day UFO sighting from Maury Island, Washington, down in South Puget Sound, involves this kind of slag, liquid slag that came off of a hovering UFO that seemed to be in trouble. I think you probably remember this. This was actually before Roswell, New Mexico. It was before Kenneth Arnold's sighting, and this was in June 21st of 1947. And if you'd like me to kind of relate that story real quickly.
Yeah, we got a couple, but wasn't it the same? But because we have to, sign off about 5 minutes to 8, and we might have a guest calling in. The picture I showed you with the X-Files movie star, TV star.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, so we'll find out if we get a phone call tonight. But
nice.
Yeah, it would be. But too, around 47, wasn't there a lot of sightings of UFOs around Mount Rainier also at the same time?
Exactly. Maury Island happened first, and then probably a week later, Kenneth Arnold, a fire extinguisher salesperson who was also a private pilot, was flying over Mount Rainier on a beautiful clear day, and he was actually had some extra time, so he decided to do a run around the mountain to see if he could spot a crashed military transport that had been lost on the mountain. No one could find it because of the winter weather when it went down, and so now the weather was being nice and melting, so he was checking it out, see if he could find it. And he says that 9 flying saucers that were kind of delta-shaped, he calls them, flew in and out of the mountains around Mount Rainier, and he clocked them on his windshield from one post to the other post, and kind of calculated that they were going at least 9,000 or 10,000 miles an hour, which was astronomical back then, of course, in 1947. When he landed in it was either Kennewick or Yakima, he actually landed his plane, and when he got off, he reported it. And the reporter that showed up at the small airport to kind of interview him, Kenneth Arnold, said that these mysterious objects were flying as if a saucer would skip over the water. They kind of were flying in stutter patterns. And, of course, that's the famous quote that started the whole idea of the UFOs being flying saucers, even though they weren't saucer-shaped when he saw them. And that, of course, went around the world. That sighting started a major flap, and more folks saw these kinds of things. And, of course, 2 weeks later, July 8th, 1947 is when Roswell, New Mexico, and Mac Brazel comes into the local newspaper office and tells his buddy that he has found a crash saucer on the ranch that he was managing.
Yeah, that is, so scary. And yet again, the government comes back and says, well, no, they're weather balloons. I mean, they even used the excuse after World War II was over that it could still be, and this is what I find so ironically funny, it could be, you ready for this? One of those fire bombs that Japan sent during World War II on a balloon, still floating around. I find that so very hard to believe on that one.
Oh, they have come up with all sorts of explanations ever since that initial article. It was actually a press release from the 59th Bomber Wing out there in Roswell. They actually put a press release out to the local newspaper that they had captured a flying disc, or recovered a flying disc. They didn't really capture it. It crashed already. And ever since then, they have tried to kind of bring, contradict what they actually said initially. And they've, of course, gone to weather balloons. They thought, as a matter of fact, they posed the General Ramey, the commander of the base, with a old weather balloon and was trying to pass that off as what it was. They've even said it was, in more recent times, they've said it was crash dummies that were falling off of some kind of a test balloon that went over the area at the time. So, yeah, it's kind of like mixed in with a whole lot of disinformation about what really happened, but there have been many books written on it and many interviews with witnesses who actually saw either the craft or the bodies of the dead aliens. And I believe one of them was mentioning that there was a live alien that was captured in Roswell, New Mexico.
Yeah, and I guess he lived for a period of a few years, or actually, I think up to the mid-50s or something before it expired.
Yes.
And you know what? It's funny. Like the release you were just talking about, like the two Navy fighter pilots, capturing a unidentified object. I don't know anything on this earth that could go at that speed. Especially if it had a pilot in it, that would be not looking like a bug when you step on it. It would be nothing left of the pilot, and to be able to make those turns, we just don't have anything. And it was so funny that it got released. Now, it might have got released accidentally, or they might have released it purposely so they could wait a week and debunk it.
Yes. Yeah, they did the same thing exactly. Just during those, shortly thereafter, those gun camera footages were released, and there is a mystery about how they released and who released them and whether they were classified at the time that they were leaked out. those gun camera footages of the Tic Tac